Reading from Krishna book, chapter 33, description of the rasa dance. Thus, hearing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, speaking to pacify him, the gopis became very much pleased. They became completely relieved of the great suffering of separation, not only by hearing the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but also by touching his hands and legs. After this, the Supreme Personality of Godhead began his rasa dance. A dance in the midst of many girls is called a rasa dance. So Krishna began to dance among the most beautiful and fortunate girls within the three worlds. The gopis of Vrindavan were so attracted to him, danced with Krishna hand in hand. Krishna's rasa dance should never be compared to any kind of material dance, such as a ball dance or a society dance. The rasa dance is a completely spiritual performance. In order to establish this fact, Krishna, the supreme mystic, expanded himself into many forms and stood beside each gopi, placing his hands on the shoulders of the gopis on both sides of him. He began to dance in their midst. The mystic expansions of Krishna were not perceived by the gopis because Krishna appeared alone to each of them. Each gopi thought that Krishna was dancing with her alone. Above that wonderful dance flew many airplanes carrying the descendants of heaven of the heavenly planets, who were very eager to see the wonderful dance of Krishna and the gopis. The Gandharvas and the Kinnaras began to sing, and accompanied by their respective wives, all the Gandharvas began to shower flowers on the dancers. As the gopis and Krishna danced together, a very blissful musical sound was produced from the tinkling of their bells, ornaments, and bangles. It appeared that Krishna was a greenish sapphire locket in the midst of a golden necklace decorated with valuable stones. While Krishna and the gopis danced, they displayed extraordinary, beautiful bodily features. The movements of their legs, their placing their hands on one another, the movements of their eyebrows, their smiling, the movements of the gopis' breasts, clothes, and earrings, their cheeks, their hair with flowers. As Krishna and the gopis sang and danced, these combined to appear like clouds, thunder, snow, and lightning. Krishna's bodily features appeared just like a group of clouds. The gopis' songs were like thunder. Their beauty appeared to be just like lightning in the sky, and the drops of perspiration visible on their faces appeared like falling snow. In this way, the gopis and Krishna fully engaged in dancing. The necks of the gopis became tinted with red due to their desire to enjoy Krishna more and more. To satisfy them, Krishna began to clap his hands in time with their singing. Actually, the whole world is full of Krishna's singing, but it is appreciated in different ways by different kinds of living entities. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Ye yata mam prapadyante thams tathaiva bhajami aham. Krishna is dancing, and every living entity is also dancing. But there is a difference between the dancing in the spiritual world and that in the material world. This is expressed by the author of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, who says that the master dancer is Krishna and everyone else is his servant. Everyone is trying to imitate Krishna's dancing. Those who are actually in Krishna consciousness respond rightly to the dancing of Krishna. They do not try to dance independently. But those in the material world try to imitate Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The living entities are dancing under the direction of Krishna's Maya and are thinking that they are equal to Krishna. But this is not a fact. In Krishna consciousness, this misconception is absent. For a person in Krishna consciousness knows that Krishna is the Supreme Master and everyone else is his servant. One has to dance to please Krishna, not to imitate or attempt to become equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The gopis wanted to please Krishna, and therefore, as Krishna sang, they responded and encouraged him by saying, "Well done, well done." Sometimes they presented beautiful music for his pleasure, and he responded by praising their singing. When some of the gopis became very tired from dancing and moving their bodies, they placed their hands on the shoulders of Sri Krishna. Then their hair loosened and flowers fell to the ground. When they placed their hands on Krishna's shoulder, they became overwhelmed by the fragrance of his body, which emanated from the lotus, other aromatic flowers, and the pulp of sandalwood. They became filled with attraction for him and began to kiss him. Some gopis touched Krishna cheek to cheek, and Krishna began to offer them chewed betel nuts from his mouth, which they accepted with great pleasure by kissing. And by accepting those betel nuts, the gopis spiritually advanced. The gopis became tired after long singing and dancing. Krishna was dancing beside them, and to alleviate their fatigue, they took Sri Krishna's hand and placed it on their raised breasts. Krishna's hand, as well as the breasts of the gopis, are eternally auspicious. Therefore, when they combined, both of them became spiritually enhanced. The gopis so enjoyed the husband of the goddess of fortune, that they forgot that they had any other husbands in the world. And upon being embraced by the arms of Krishna and dancing and singing with him, they forgot everything. Srimad Bhagavatam thus describes the beauty of the gopis while they were rasa dancing with Krishna. There were lotus flowers over both their ears, and their faces were decorated with sandalwood pulp. They wore tilak, and there were drops of perspiration on their smiling mouths. From their feet came the tinkling sound of the ankle bells and bangles. The flowers within their hair were falling to the lotus feet of Krishna, and he was very satisfied. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, all these gopis are expansions of Krishna's pleasure potency. Touching their bodies with his hands and looking at their pleasing eyes, Krishna enjoyed the gopis exactly as a child enjoys playing with the reflection of his body in a mirror. When Krishna touched the different parts of their bodies, the gopis felt surcharged with spiritual energy. They could not adjust their loosened clothes, although they tried to keep them adjusted properly. Their hair and garments became scattered, and their ornaments became loosened as they forgot themselves in the company of Krishna. While Krishna was enjoying the company of the gopis in the rasa dance, the astonished demigods and their wives gathered in the sky. The moon, being afflicted with a sort of lust, began to watch the dance and became stunned with wonder. The gopis had prayed to the goddess Katyayani to have Krishna as their husband. Now Krishna was fulfilling their desire by expanding himself in as many forms as there were gopis and enjoying them exactly like a husband. Srila Shukadev Goswami has remarked that Krishna is self-sufficient. He is Atmaram. He doesn't need anyone else for his satisfaction. But because the gopis wanted Krishna as their husband, he fulfilled their desire. When Krishna saw that the gopis were tired from dancing with him, he immediately began to wipe his hands over their faces so that their fatigue would be relieved. In order to reciprocate the kind hospitality of Krishna, the gopis began to look at him lovingly. They were overjoyed by the auspicious touch of the hand of Krishna. Their smiling cheeks shone with beauty, and they began to sing the glories of Krishna with transcendental pleasure. As pure devotees, the more the gopis enjoyed Krishna's company, the more they became enlightened with his glories, and thus they reciprocated with him. They wanted to satisfy Krishna by glorifying his transcendental pastimes. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of all masters, and the gopis wanted to worship him for his unusual exhibition of mercy upon them. The gopis and Krishna entered the water of the Yamuna just to relieve their fatigue from the ras dance. The lily flower garlands around the necks of the gopis were strewn to pieces due to the gopis embracing the body of Krishna, and the flowers were reddish from being smeared with the kunkuma on their breasts. The bumblebees were humming about in order to get honey from the flowers. Krishna and the gopis entered the water of the Yamuna just as an elephant enters a water tank with his many female companions. Both the gopis and Krishna forgot their real identities. playing in the water, enjoying each other's company, and relieving the fatigue of the Ras dance. The gopis began to splash water on the body of Krishna, all the while smiling, and Krishna enjoyed this. As Krishna was taking pleasure in the joking words and splashing water, the demigods in the heavenly planets showered flowers. The demigods thus praised the super excellent Ras dance of Krishna, the supreme enjoyer, and his pastimes with the gopis in the water of the Yamuna. After this, Lord Krishna and the gopis came out of the water and began to stroll along the bank of the Yamuna, where a nice breeze was blowing, carrying the aroma of different kinds of flowers over the water and land. While strolling on the bank of the Yamuna, Krishna recited various kinds of poetry. He thus enjoyed the company of the gopis in the soothing moonlight of the autumn. Sex desire is especially excited in the autumn season, but the wonderful thing about Krishna's association with the gopis is that there was no question of sex desire. It was, as clearly stated in the Bhagavata description by Sukadeva Goswami, avarudha suvrata. The sex impulse was completely controlled. There is a distinction between Lord Krishna's dancing with the gopis and the ordinary dancing of living entities within the material world. In order to clear up further misconceptions about the Ras dance and the affairs of Krishna and the gopis, Maharaj Parikshit, the hero of Srimad Bhagavatam, told Shukadev Goswami, Krishna appeared on the earth to establish the regulative principles of religion and to curb the predominance of irreligion. But the behavior of Krishna and the gopis might encourage irreligious principles in the material world. I'm simply surprised that he would act in such a way, enjoying the company of others' wives in the dead of night. This statement of Maharaj Parikshit's was very much appreciated by Shukadev Goswami. The answer anticipates the abominable acts of the Mayavadi impersonalists who place themselves in the position of Krishna and enjoy the company of young girls and women. The basic Vedic injunctions never allow a person to enjoy sex with any woman except his own wife. Krishna's appreciation of the gopis appeared to be distinctly in violation of these rules. Maharaj Parikshit understood the total situation from Shukadev Goswami. Yet, to further clarify the transcendental nature of Krishna and the gopis in the Ras dance, he expressed his surprise. This is very important in order to check the unrestricted association with women by the Prakrita Sahajyas. In his statement, Maharaj Parikshit has used several important words which require clarification. The first word, yugupsitam, means abominable. The first doubt of Maharaj Parikshit was as follows. Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead who had invented himself to establish religious principles. Why then did he mix with others' wives in the dead of night and enjoy dancing, embracing, and kissing? According to the Vedic injunctions, this is not allowed. Also, when the gopis first came to him, he gave instructions to them to return to their homes. To call the wives of other persons or young girls and enjoy dancing with them is certainly abominable according to the Vedas. Why should Krishna have done this? Another word used here is apta kama. Some may take it for granted that Krishna was very lusty among young girls, but Parikshit Maharaj said that this was not possible. He could not be lusty. First of all, from the material calculation, he was only 8 years old. At that age, a boy cannot be lusty. Apta kama means that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is self-satisfied. Even if he were lusty, he doesn't need to take help from others to satisfy his lusty desires. The next point is that, although not lusty himself, he might have been seduced by the lusty desires of the gopis. But Maharaj Parikshit then used another word, Yadupati, which indicates that Krishna is the most exalted personality in the dynasty of the Yadus. The kings in the dynasty of Yadu were considered to be the most pious, and their descendants were also like that. Having taken birth in that family, How could Krishna have been seduced, even by the gopis? It is concluded, therefore, that it was not possible for Krishna to do anything abominable. But Maharaj Parikshit was in doubt as to why Krishna acted in that way. What was the real purpose? Another word Maharaj Parikshit used when he addressed Shukadev Goswami is suvrata, which means to take a vow to enact pious activities. Shukadev Goswami was an educated brahmachari, and under the circumstances, it was not possible for him to indulge in sex. This is strictly prohibited for brahmacharis, and what to speak of the brahmachari like Sukadev Goswami. Um, but because the circumstances of the Ras dance were very suspect, Maharaj Parikshit inquired for clarification from Sukadev Goswami. Shukadev Goswami immediately replied that transgressions of religious principles by the Supreme Controller testify to his great power. For example, fire can assume any abominable thing. That is the manifestation of the supremacy of fire. Similarly, the sun can absorb water from a urinal or from stool, and the sun is not polluted. Rather, due to the influence of the sunshine, the polluted, contaminated place becomes disinfected and sterilized. One may also argue that since Krishna is the supreme authority, his activities should be followed. In answer to his argument, Shukadev Goswami has very clearly said that the Ishvara, or supreme controller, may sometimes violate his own instructions. But this is possible only for the controller himself, not for the followers. Unusual and uncommon activities by the controller can never be imitated. Shukadev Goswami warned that the conditioned followers who are not actually in control should never even imagine imitating the uncommon activities of the controller. A Mayavadi philosopher may falsely claim to be God or Krishna, but he cannot actually act like Krishna. He can persuade his followers to falsely imitate the Ras dance, but he is unable to lift Govardhan Hill. We have many experiences in the past of Mayavadi rascals who delude their followers by posing themselves as Krishna in order to enjoy the raslila. In many instances, they were checked by the government, arrested, and punished. In Orissa, Thakur Bhaktivinoda punished a so called incarnation of Vishnu who was imitating the raslila with young girls. There were many complaints against the so called incarnation. And at that time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a magistrate, and the government deputed him to deal with that rascal, and he punished him severely. The Ras dance cannot be imitated by anyone. Shukadev Goswami warns that one should not even think of imitating it. He specifically mentions that if, out of foolishness, one tries to imitate Krishna's Ras dance, he will be killed, just like a person who wants to imitate Lord Shiva's drinking of an ocean of poison. Lord Shiva drank an ocean of poison and kept it within his throat. The poison made his throat turn blue, and therefore Lord Shiva is called Nilakanta. But if any ordinary person tries to imitate Lord Shiva by drinking poison or smoking ganja, he is sure to be vanquished and will die within a very short time. Lord Sri Krishna's dealings with the gopis occurred under special circumstances. Most of the gopis in their previous lives were great sages, expert in the study of the Vedas, and when Lord Krishna appeared as Lord Ramachandra, they wanted to enjoy with him. Lord Ramachandra gave them the benediction that their desires would be fulfilled when he would appear as Krishna. Therefore, the desire of the gopis to enjoy the appearance of Lord Krishna was long cherished. So they approached the goddess Katyayani to have Krishna as their husband. There are many other circumstances which also testify to the supreme authority of Krishna and show that he is not bound by rules and regulations of the material world. In special cases, he acts as he likes to favor his devotees. This is possible only for him, because he is the supreme controller. People in general should follow the instructions of Lord Krishna as given in the Bhagavad Gita and should not even imagine imitating Lord Krishna in the Ras dance. Krishna's lifting of Govardhan Hill and his killing of great demons like Putana are all obviously extraordinary activities. Similarly, the Ras dance is also an uncommon activity and cannot be imitated by any ordinary man. An ordinary person engaged in his occupational duty, like Arjuna, should execute his duty for the satisfaction of Krishna. That is within his power. Arjuna was a fighter, and Krishna wanted him to fight for his satisfaction. Arjuna agreed, although at first he was not willing to fight. Duties are required for ordinary persons. They should not jump up and try to imitate Krishna and indulge in a raslila and thus bring about their ruin. One should know with certainty that Krishna has no personal interest in whatever he did for the benediction of the gopis. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, na mam karmani limpanti. Krishna never enjoys or suffers the results of his activities. Therefore, it is not possible for him to act irreligiously. He is transcendental to all religious duties and principles. He is untouched by the modes of material nature. He is the supreme controller of all living entities, whether in human society, in demigod society, in the heavenly planets, or in the lower forms of life. And he is also the supreme controller of material nature. Therefore, he has nothing to do with religious or irreligious principles. Shukadev Goswami further concludes that the great sages and devotees, who are washed clean of all conditioned life, can move freely even within the contamination of material nature by keeping Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, within their hearts. In this way, they also do not become subject to the laws of pleasure and pain in the modes of material nature. How then is it possible for Krishna, who appears by his own internal potency, to be subject to the laws of karma? In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord clearly says that whenever he appears, he does so by his internal potency. He's not forced to accept the body by the laws of karma like an ordinary living entity. Every other living entity is forced to accept a certain type of body by its previous actions. But when Krishna appears, he always appears in a body that is not forced upon him by the actions of his past deeds. His body is a vehicle for his transcendental pleasure pastimes, which are enacted by his internal potency. He has no obligation to the laws of karma. The Mayavadi monist must accept a certain type of body, being forced by the laws of nature. Therefore, his claim to being one with Krishna or God is only theoretical. Such persons who claim to be equal with Krishna and indulge in a ras dance create a dangerous situation for the people in general. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was already present as a supersoul within the bodies of the gopis and their husbands. He is the guide of all living entities, as is confirmed in the Katha Upanishad, Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. Supersoul directs the individual soul to act, and the supersoul is the actor and the witness of all action. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is present in everyone's heart, and that from him come all knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. He is the original person to be known by Vedic knowledge. He is the author of Vedanta philosophy, and he knows the Vedanta philosophy perfectly well. The so-called Vedantists and Mayavadis cannot understand Krishna as he is. They simply mislead their followers by imitating the actions of Krishna in an unauthorized way. Krishna, the super soul of everyone, is already within the body of everyone. Therefore, if he sees someone or embraces someone, there's no question of impropriety. Some ask, if Krishna is self-sufficient, why did he at all manifest the pastimes with the gopis, which are distributing to the so-called moralists of the world? The answer is that such activities show special mercy to the fallen conditioned souls. The gopis are expansions of his internal energy, but because Krishna wanted to exhibit the raslila, they appeared as ordinary human beings. In the material world, Pleasure is ultimately manifested in the sex attraction between man and woman. The man lives simply to be attracted by women, and the woman lives simply to be attracted by men. That is the basic principle of material life. As soon as these attractions are combined, people become more and more implicated in material existence. In order to show them special favor, Krishna exhibited his raslila dance. It is just to captivate the conditioned souls. Since they are very much attracted by sex, they can enjoy the same life with Krishna and thus become liberated from the material condition. In the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Maharaj Parikshit also explains that the pastimes and activities of Lord Krishna are medicine for the conditioned souls. If they simply hear about Krishna, they become relieved of the material disease. They are addicted to material enjoyment and are accustomed to reading sex literature. But by hearing these transcendental pastimes of Krishna with the gopis, they will be relieved of material contamination. How they should hear and from whom is also explained by Shukadev Goswami. The difficulty is that the whole world is full of Mayavadis, and when they become professional reciters of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and when people, without knowing the effect of the Mayavad philosophy, hear from such persons, they become confused. Discussion of the Raslila among people in general is discouraged because they are affected by the Mayavad philosophy. But if one who is advanced explains and people hear from him, certainly the hearers will be gradually elevated to the position of Krishna consciousness and liberated from materially contaminated life. Another important point is that none of the gopis who danced with Krishna were in their material bodies. They danced with Krishna in their spiritual bodies. All their husbands thought that their wives were sleeping by their sides. The so called husbands of the gopis were already enamored with the influence of the external energy of Krishna. So, by dint of this very energy, they could not understand that their wives had gone to dance with Krishna. What then is the basis of accusing Krishna of dancing with others' wives? The bodies of the gopis, which were their husbands, were lying in bed, but the spiritual part and parcels of Krishna were dancing with him. Krishna is the supreme person, the whole spirit, and he danced with the spiritual bodies of the gopis. There is therefore no reason to accuse Krishna in any way. After the Ras dance was over, the night of Brahma, a very, very long period, as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, turned into the Brahma Muhurta. The Brahma Muhurta takes place about 1.5 hours before sunrise. It is recommended that one should rise from bed at that time, and after finishing daily ablutions, take to spiritual activities by performing Mangala Arti and chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. This period is very convenient for the execution of spiritual activities. When that auspicious moment arrived, Krishna asked the gopis to leave. Although his beloveds were not willing to quit his company, they were very obedient to him. As soon as Krishna asked them to go home, they immediately left and returned home. Shukadev Goswami concludes this episode of the Raslila by pointing out that if a person hears from the right source about the pastimes of Krishna, who is Vishnu himself, and the gopis, who are expansions of his energy, then he will be relieved of the most dangerous type of disease, namely lust. In other words, one who actually hears the Raslila will become completely freed from the lusty desire of sex life and elevated to the highest level of spiritual understanding. Generally, because they hear the Raslila from Mayavadis, and they themselves are Mayavadis, people become more and more implicated in sex life. The conditioned soul should hear the Raslila dance, from an authorized spiritual master and be trained by him so he can understand the whole situation. Thus, one can be elevated to the highest standard of spiritual life. Otherwise, one will be implicated. Material lust is a kind of heart disease, and to cure this material heart disease of the conditioned soul, it is recommended that one should hear, but not from the impersonalist rascals. If one hears from the right sources with right understanding, then his situation will be different. Shukadev Goswami has used the word Shradhana Vita for one who is trained in spiritual life. Shraddha, or faith, is the beginning. One who has developed his faith in Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Spirit Soul, can both describe and hear the raslila. Oh, Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. Sukadev Goswami also uses the word anushrinuyat. One must hear from the disciplic succession. Anu means following, and anu also means always. So one must always follow the disciplic succession and not hear from any stray professional reciter, whether a Mayavadi or an ordinary man. Anu Shri Nuyat means that one must hear from an authorized person who is in the disciplic succession and is always engaged in Krishna consciousness. When a person hears the Ras Lila in this way, the effect will be sure. He will be elevated to the highest position of spiritual life. Shukadev Goswami uses two specific words, Bhaktim and param. Bhaktim param means execution of devotional service above the neophyte stage. Those who are simply attracted to temple worship, who do not know the philosophy of bhakti, are in the neophyte stage. That sort of bhakti is not the perfectional stage. The perfectional stage of bhakti, or devotional service, is completely free from material contamination. The most dangerous aspect of contamination is lust, or sex life. Bhaktim param, devotional service, is so potent that the more one advances in this line, the more he loses his attraction for material life. One is actually deriving benefit from hearing the Raslila dance, surely achieves the transcendental position. He surely loses all traces of lust in his heart. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that according to the Bhagavad Gita, Brahma's day and Brahma's night are periods of solar years expanding to 4,300,000 multiplied by 1,000. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Ras dance was performed during the long period of Brahma's night. But the gopis could not understand that. In order to fulfill that desire, Krishna extended the night to cover such a great period of time. One may ask how this was possible, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur reminds that Krishna, although bound by a small rope, could show his mother the whole universe within his mouth. How was this possible? The answer is that he can do anything for the pleasure of his devotees. Similarly, because the gopis wanted to enjoy Krishna, they were given the opportunity to associate with him for a long period. This was done according to his promise. When Krishna stole the garments of the gopis while they were taking a bath at Chiragat on the Yamuna, he promised to fulfill their desire in some future night. In one night, therefore, they enjoyed the company of Krishna as their beloved husband, but that night was not an ordinary night. It was a night of Brahma, lasting millions and millions of years. Everything is possible for Krishna, for he is the supreme controller. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 33rd chapter of Krishna, description of the Ras dance.
Om Jnanatmirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mayam Dadhati Shapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Jatapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sadivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Guruna Sindho Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Ansha Kolptarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Water. The Shukadeva Goswami first describes the dancing of Lord Krishna and the gopis, and then their playing together in the water. And then there's an extended discussion between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadeva Goswami concerning the propriety of Krishna's actions. Because these activities appear like the activities of the material world. And the conditioned souls may misunderstand Krishna and think that these things are something like the activities we have here. And it's described here that they'll act like a medicine to cure the disease of the heart infected by lust, but the medicine has to be administered properly. If we hear from the ordinary people or from Mayavadis or Sahajas, then the disease can get worse. But when we hear from pure devotees, then we can arrive at a purified understanding. So the Parikshit Maharaj raises this question concerning the propriety of Krishna's dealings with the gopis. And Sukadeva Goswami appreciates the question and answers at some length. And there's so many arguments given, and Srila Prabhupada expands them or presents them in a little expanded, because it's so important that the reader understand these things properly and not misunderstand. On the one side, the activities of Krishna and the gopis are very attractive. And even the conditioned soul who thinks they're like material activities will be attracted on those grounds. They'll think this is something like what we're most interested in. So, and the pure devotees will not hear that way. They'll understand that these are dealings of Krishna's supreme spiritual potency. but particularly for the instruction of everyone. Shukadeva Goswami answers Parikshit Maharaj's question very carefully. At first he says that, what is that, Tgism Doshaya? Is that the first verse? Yeah. Ishvara nam cha sahasam Tgism Doshaya. So the dharma vyatikramo drishta, it may be seen that these are transgressions, but Tgism Dosha, there's no fault on the part of the powerful controllers. Lord Shiva can drink an ocean of poison. It's not a problem. If we try to do that, it's out of the question. The sun drinks urine from a contaminated place and doesn't become contaminated. Rather, the place becomes sterilized, purified. So or fire, whatever you supply to it, is purified or remains uncontaminated. So this applies for Krishna's transcendental activities. Even if we think, Prabhupada said, even if you think Krishna is lusty, he's unlimitedly lusty. So this is Krishna. And Sukadeva Goswami cautions that one should never try to imitate the activities of the super powerful. Even in one's mind, one shouldn't dream of it. Otherwise, one will destroy himself. The statements of the Lord and the devotees have to be given priority in our actions. And the Lord's exemplary activities should be followed, but not the activities impossible for us or beyond our station, as they say, beyond our place. So one should carry out the instructions of the supreme controllers and not try to imitate them. Krishna is beyond the piety and impiety of the material world. He's free from false ego. What is that? Namam karmani limpanti, name karma pale spriha. He's not interested in any material achievement. And there's no material work or material action that can affect him. Itimam yo vijanati karma birna sabhajate. Even those who know this about Krishna are freed from the reactions of material activities. Then what to speak of the Lord himself? The devotees who are satisfied in Krishna consciousness are unaffected by material reactions. So what about Krishna? How could he be affected? Then another argument's given that, well, he's the super soul in the heart of all living beings. So what's wrong? He's already there in the hearts of the gopis. So if he comes out and dances with them or touches them, there's no fault. No one would criticize that you've expanded yourself as the super soul within all of these women. That's immoral. No, that's the business of the super soul. So if that same super soul appears outside, what is the harm? Krishna, then someone might ask, why does Krishna even show these activities? And the answer is given that it's to show mercy, so that people will be attracted to Krishna's transcendental activities. And finally, Shukadeva Goswami gives his benediction. Vikriditam prajapatu biritam travishnu shraddhanvito nishinuyad tavarniyedya bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhyakam vidrogamashra pahinotya chirena tira. Anyone who hears these activities of Krishna and the gopis, Krishna, the original Vishnu, Shraddhanvita, faithfully, and Anushinuyat, from pure devotees, or who describes them, Pratilabhya Bhaktim Param Bhagavati. He obtains a blessing of pure devotional service to the Lord. And kamam pridrogam ashu apahinoti achirena dira. Thus he quickly becomes sober and conquers lust, the disease of the heart. Yes. All right. Are there some questions, some comments?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I'm a little bit confused by the purport when it says, or Prabhupada's words when it says that that the gopis, their physical bodies were with the husband and their spiritual forms were dancing with Krishna. It sounds like that they would have like us. It sounds like they would then have like us, a material body with a soul.
They have spiritual bodies, and then Krishna, or the Yogamaya, creates some, what would you say, show bodies. Not show bottles, show bodies. Just so the husbands would think, yes, our wives are still here, everything's standard. Everyone's real body is spiritual. So they had spiritual bodies, but just for show, Maya or Yogamaya exhibits these material bodies.
And then it also mentions that the husbands were enamored by the external energy.
Yeah. External energy, what is it saying? Let's see what it says. Here in the word for word meanings says Maya, by the spiritual potency of illusion. They were thinking that way. By Krishna's illusory energy, but which illusory energy? Yeah. Just in the purport to the same verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes a verse from Rupa Goswami saying that the husbands of the gopis were together with doubles manufactured by Maya. The gopis are the internal energy. They're not even like us, souls and material bodies. They belong to the internal body, energy. See if there's something more about that. Yeah, it just says mohita, maya, tasya maya. By Krishna's maya, they were bewildered. So maya means energy. Maya means energy. So even if you take it as the material energy is part and parcel of the spiritual energy.
And if I can ask one more question. We know that by hearing the Shastra, we're purified, and the modes of nature are purified, and that's how our heart becomes purified. What is it about the pastimes of the gopis that specifically purifies us from lust, when it seems like from a logical perspective, it could incite lust?
Seems
from a logical perspective
that it would work the other way. Prabhupada gave, I'll work backwards. Prabhupada had given some advice that if we feel some lusty impulse, we can remember Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, and that will help us. That will help us conquer those material feelings. And one devotee, Rupanuga Prabhu, we were mentioning him yesterday, wrote to Srila Prabhupada, said, is there a similar hint regarding anger? And Prabhupada said, yes, when you're angry, you can think of Lord Nrsingadev. He said, you're only a little angry, he's unlimitedly angry. In first canto, Narad Muni says, isn't it true that the same thing that causes a disease can be applied therapeutically to cure the disease? Just like we drink too many, have too many milk sweets and too many milk products, and we get stomach problems. So then the cure for that is yogurt. The Ayurvedic doctors mix it with little stuff, but basically it's the yogurt Prabhupada said that does the work. So it's the same thing. Yogurt is just milk, but it's administered therapeutically and cures the disease. So in the same way, like if we say to someone, don't think of lusty activities. No, his mind, I want to think of lusty activities. I can't help thinking of lusty activities. All right, think of lusty activities, but these lusty activities. Otherwise, we say, don't think of, and immediately I think of. Don't think of a white rabbit, and immediately you think of one. So don't think of lusty activities. The Mayavadis, get rid of all desires, make your heart, make your mind free from all thoughts, all clinging, all desire. Very hard to do. But if you tell the mind says, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to keep bringing in stuff that I've got stored up. But if you tell the mind, all right, you want to think of lusty activities, think of these lusty activities. And then by hearing of these activities, because it's Krishna, one becomes purified. Just like so many demons, they're killed by Krishna, they attain liberation. Because it's Krishna. So as soon as Krishna is there, it becomes pure. Pavitram paramam param.
But Marge, if we're telling someone with lustful inclinations, if we're then telling someone with lustful inclinations to then, read the pastimes, these pastimes of Krishna, isn't it a route to sahajism?
That can be also. Therefore, they have to read it under proper direction as it's presented here. It's like half narrative and half cautions. The directions are longer than the pastime, practically. So therefore, it has to be handled carefully. It's not for common discussion. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't talk about these things with ordinary people. But very carefully, these things have been mentioned here. Generally, when we discuss, we see that these things are originally there in the spiritual world, but we don't go into much detail. So here, there's a little more discussion. And then there's literature where these things are described elaborately, but that's intended for liberated souls who are advanced in devotional service, not for the ordinary devotee even. Not that because I've, got 100 rupees in my pocket, I can go to Loy Bazaar and enter into the pastimes of Radha and Krishna and understand all these things. Very carefully, we have to hear about these things. In that, I mentioned the other day a book by Srila B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, where he talks about keeping these things on the higher level. In one place he was saying, did I lose my thought? I think I did. Two thoughts. Yeah, I've got them back. He said that in Gaudiya Math, the devotees were permitted to, that there's some high sections of Chaitanya Charitamrita, the higher section of discussions with Ramananda Roy, and like that. He said, we were permitted to read them, but not discuss them. You're reading the book, it's not like they're blacked out, but they were off limits for discussion. In that same book, Srila Sridhar Maharaj tells the sort of subject matter of Ujjal Nilamani by Srila Rupa Goswami. He outlines the book, and then he says, at least this is what I've heard, I haven't read. I'm such an advanced Vaishnava, and we'll go to Loy Bazaar and we'll pick up these things and we'll discuss and we'll be on the fast track to Gopi Bhav. But he said, at least this is what I've heard, I haven't read. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, it says that when we got second initiation, then we've been ordered by our spiritual master that we have to chant 3 times. But it's a saying among the devotees that we can also chant more than 3, and some says no, we should stick to 3. So just want to know your advice on that. What's the Shastra says on this?
And Gayatri? Tree Sandhya.
3 sandhyas.
And if you're offering to the deity or for some purpose like that, Prabhupada never advised us to chant more often. I don't know about any particular injunctions, but Prabhupada never recommended, like Gayatri meditation or something like that. Tree Sandhya, that's all.
Yeah, thank you.
And Kirtan.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In regards to what Srila Prabhupada mentions that, the husbands of the gopis were standing next to them and like they never left their company, basically. Isn't it this similar to the advice that Lord Chaitanya gave, if I remember well, to either Rupa Sanatana Goswami when they were working under the Nawab, when they said, he gave the analogy of the wife at home, how she should conduct herself if she has a paramour.
Raghunath Goswami, I think.
Was it? Who was it? Raghunath Goswami, sorry. It seems like similar, like saying, you have to keep your devotion like an internal thing. You should not be showing it.
Well, that's also there, that one is advised not to wear one's confidential, wear one's ecstatic devotional service on one's sleeve. That's mentioned. When there's ecstasy, the devotees try to keep that hidden. And the sahajas, they're working overtime to try to put it on display. Yeah.
And also wanted to make another point. Srila Prabhupada mentions during the narration, those who are actually in Krishna consciousness respond rightly to the dancing of Krishna. They do not try to dance independently. And this is also part of Srila Prabhupada prayers when he reached Boston Harbor, when he was saying, Lord, make me dance, make me dance, make me dance 3 times, he said. And there's also an expression in the West that says dancing to somebody's tune. Means that you're supposed to be doing what that person would like you to do. So these things are seem to be all interlinked in a way.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you. Very nice.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm just wondering, I'm not sure if it's a good question, but I'm just wondering how the demigods were allowed to watch the rasalila.
And special privileges. They're demigods. Let's see. Of course, that's one thing the demigods had a contribution to make. Raining flowers and singing the glories of the Lord and so on. That doesn't say. Okay. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, is it that the sages who performed the penances in the previous lives, so they had some material lusty desires, so that just to remove those desires, Krishna performed the pastimes to like purify them. That's
No, it's not mentioned, not that I saw here, but they had a spiritual desire to associate with Lord Ramchandra in conjugal love. But Lord Ramchandra, I'm Ekapatni Vrata, I only have one wife. I don't do these things, so I can't accommodate you. But in the future, I'll appear as Krishna, and then you'll have your desire fulfilled. So that happened. Okay.
one more question, Maharaj. That is this the purpose of the raslila? Is it just to remove the lusty desires
No,
from
purpose
us?
also is Krishna wants to reciprocate with his devotees. So one benefit for us is that we become purified. But these are the eternal exchanges of Krishna with his internal energies. So Krishna has his own purpose apart from curing us. These are his eternal activities with his devotees in devotional service.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, like Krishna was just 8 years old boy, and these gopis, all these married women, and even demigod wives also. Like, how come they have like desire to marry him? Because for 8 year boy we have vatsalya bhav, but not but difficult to understand because these gopis were elderly women and 8 year boy
Gopis
were elderly women, like
no, not the elderly
they were
gopis.
married. They were married, so like
Married means still, like in India, they would be married at 10.
okay.
Not that they're like 30-year-old women who are.
But for 8 year boy, like how this desire to be as husband, like because when you see 8 year boy, you don't have.
Boy, this is a little different. That's one thing. Is that a girl at a even at late childhood, she's maybe thinking about getting married and having a husband and having children. The boys aren't thinking about that at all, right? That may come later. But so the girls at a young age can think of these things.
Maharaj, I just wanted to ask why you did not read Ujjwal Neelmani.
Why I didn't what?
You said you did not read Ujjwal
No, I
Neelmani.
not. That Srila Sridhar Maharaj said.
Oh.
Srila Prabhupada's godbrother, Srila B.R. Sridhar Maharaj. He said, he gave the outline of the book, and then he said, at least that's what I've heard. I haven't read it.
Is it should we read it? Is it recommended? Is it recommended we should read it?
Well, what's the purport of my having told that? It's not a prohibition and it's not a recommendation. It's something to think about. That here's an exceedingly advanced Vaishnava. He's saying, I haven't read it. And what are we? We're lucky if we can get from one end of the mantra to the other without committing 10 offenses. So one might think about that. I'm not saying whether you can read it or not read it, but you might want to think about that.
Thing is, like, is there any eligibility for read such type of books? Listen, Mike. Is there any eligibility to read such type of books? Because Ujjwal Nirmali is very.
Yeah, these things should be read by those who are advanced in devotional service, not by the ordinary neophyte devotee. For us, there's Bhagavad Gita, there's Nectar of Instruction, Nectar of Devotion, Srimad Bhagavatam. These things may be there, but we shouldn't be. Prabhupada didn't encourage us to be so very eager to go out there and find the most Rasic literature and dive in. Like Prabhupada gave the example of medicine. Not that you go into the drugstore and say, what's the most powerful medicine you've got? You take what's prescribed by the doctor.
As well, I remember, I don't exactly. Prabhupada, in one statement was saying, when living in Vrindavan, especially, one should read Goswami's book. So Goswami's book.
Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, first start, Upadeshamrita. Other books by the Goswamis we can read, and therefore I'm not saying it's off limits. This Brihad Bhagavatamrita has been published, which I would recommend. So, but one has to have some sense of where we are and accordingly perform one's devotional service. We see that Srila Prabhupada didn't discuss these things with anyone. Yeah, it's not that his inner, that with the rest of us, he was talking about Bhagavad Gita and Sarvadharma Pratyaja and all that kind of stuff. But then when he'd get together with a few of his inner circle, he'd be talking about Ujjwala Nilmani and the other advanced Rasic literature. No, he didn't. To say nothing of, public discussion. Even privately, he didn't select out some, and he had, some quite advanced disciples. And still, he didn't call them from wherever and say, tired of, it's good that I'm able to talk about Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, but I need a few men that I can discuss real Krishna Katha with, or, advanced Krishna Katha with. So please come and stay with me. Now I'm leaving this world, or I'm not leaving this world, but whatever, please come. Let us talk. No. Didn't do it. Is that a prohibition? No, it's not a prohibition, but something to think about. Went to Radha Damodar temple, announced that in Kartik we'll read from Nectar of Devotion. Where does he read from? The very beginning. Didn't jump right into, more advanced topics because, we already know the other stuff. Right from the beginning. Yes.
Hare
And
Krishna,
this maybe is the last question. Yes.
Okay. So here in this chapter it is stated that Krishna is self-sufficient and he doesn't need nothing, but he just want to actually satisfy the gopis and has that rasa dance and exchanges. And on many other places, it is also written and said that the gopis are actually just there because they want to satisfy Krishna. And I read somewhere that Radharani said that she just want to clean Krishna's place and to cook for him, but because he won her, then she just surrendered to him. So what is actual?
Krishna's aptakama means he's self-satisfied, or whatever desire he has is already satisfied. So how is that possible? And why, are the gopis trying to satisfy Krishna? They're Krishna. They're Krishna's energy, which is not different from Krishna. Just like Narayana Rishi. He was doing tapasya in the Himalayas. And as usual, Indra got worried that this rishi may get so much power that he'll take over my spot. So then the usual strategy, he sent a squad of apsaras, beautiful heavenly women, to distract the rishi. The rishi is incarnation of Krishna, Narayana. So they came and they did their number. They sang and they danced and they tinkled their ankle bells and they looked this way and that way and they moved this way and that way and all the things that usually work. But then they saw that Narayana was expanding equally beautiful girls from his own body. And so they were frustrated. Nothing we can do to attract him. He's already got, better products already in stock. And then Indra was thwarted. So the rishi said, anyway, I'll give you one of them. And he gave Urvashi to Indra. So that means Narayana Rishi was completely self-satisfied. He had nothing to be attracted to because it was already there within himself. So the gopis are part of Krishna's own energy. They're not separate from Krishna. Not that Krishna has to go looking where's pleasure. He has his own potency for pleasure, which he can expand. Therefore, someplace in these descriptions we read that Krishna's playing with the gopis is like a person touching his own reflection in the mirror, because they're Krishna's own energy. So in that way, you're just like a man who has no money. You can give him money, and it's like, wow, it's a big deal. And you can buy him. How much will you do this for me? Well, how much will you give me? I'll give you this much. Sure. Because he has no money, and you supply it. So you're okay. I'm yours. But a millionaire, he doesn't care about your money. If I want to get an appointment, I say, well, I'll pay $10,000 for an appointment. You can keep your $10,000. What am I going to do with it? So Krishna is self-satisfied. He has everything within himself. Is that okay? Shall we have kirtan? And Hugh is leading.
Swamin iti namine namaho. Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Desha Tarne Namaste Jayo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Abrupt ending.
Paramhansa Pariprajukacharya Stotra Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath, Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamana Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Thank you all for coming. Hare Krishna. And we have a few books in stock again. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.